All right, good evening, WNBA and women's basketball fans, and welcome in to the WNBA 365 Network, your 24/7 365 comprehensive home of all things WNBA and women's basketball as we put the final cherry on top for the 2017 WNBA first half of the regular season as we begin our All-Star Game weekend festivities and All-Star Game coverage here on WNBA 365. This is WNBA 365 All-Star Central. Good evening, folks. Cal McClure joining you here this evening from the Calamac Sports Studios in San Diego, California, as we recap the last two games of the regular season and give you some first-half thoughts, standings updates, and ramble incoherently for the next hour here on the solo hosted edition of the program this evening, folks. As normal, folks, as usual, Facebook, Twitter, and live chat box is open for you folks. And as we just put out on Twitter roughly 8 or 10 minutes ago, this is a solo hosted show. So we invite you, as we have the past couple of times here, to send in more and more stuff into our chat box or to our Twitter feed. And of course, we'll get to those comments when we have a chance. But find us over on Facebook at facebook.com/WNBA365. Over on Twitter at WNBA365 or at Calamac3 with the hashtag WNBA365, or you can write in your questions, comments, or concerns into our live chat box, which should be open tonight. Again, we know that we, for some reason, had it closed down on a couple days ago, so I don't know what the deal was, but hopefully it should be up and running. And again, we're letting you folks, again, somewhat dictate the pace and tone of our game this evening. So again, send in your stuff, and we'll get to those questions, comments, or concerns in the chat box when we have ourselves a break in the action. So again, folks, we'll recap both games tonight, give you an entire first half standings update, give you some thoughts on all 12 teams, and go from there to begin the first night of All-Star coverage. As a few of my friends that are some of them are already in Seattle, some are traveling to Seattle tomorrow. And again, to all my friends going, again, have a great time, enjoy yourselves, and above all, enjoy the experience too of the All-Star Game festivities. We'll have more about that later on this evening. All right, to the two games. First up, folks, the early game this afternoon, the Sparks and Sky hooking up from Staples Center. The Chicago Sky come out after a slow start and upset the LA Sparks and giving LA their first home court loss of the season. They edge LA at the final horn, 80-80. Stephanie Dolson, 15 points, including bearing the game-winning three with 13.7 seconds left in the corner after a very sloppy defensive possession for the Sparks in the ball game at the very end of it. Courtney Vandersloot, 14 points, who came alive in the second half for Chicago in the victory. Nneka Ogwumike, 24 points, was not enough. She came up empty twice in the waning 4 seconds of the game to possibly send this game to overtime. And Candace Parker chipped in 19 points, and the Sparks had no further help outside of Ogwumike or Parker this afternoon. And the attendance today, folks, over 16,000 at Staples Center today for the Camp Day festivities. The total attendance, I believe, was 16,166. So I believe that is the probably the second highest attended game so far for Camp Days, behind Minnesota earlier this week. Folks, the Chicago Sky have somewhat been a team that perhaps found their identity somewhat lately in this batch of games. They have really done a 180, folks, and gotten themselves out of that ditch that they were stuck in earlier this season. And really the second half play for Chicago, they came alive in that second half. Obviously, the slow start hurt them a bit. But still, though, offensive scoring, either feeding Imani Boyette inside, getting the threes going between Quigley and Vandersloot, and then Stephanie Dolson steps beyond the arc a couple times and, again, buries the game-winning three. You know, after Vandersloot and the offense saves possession there when they were down one, buries the three there, and that pretty much, you know, popped LA's balloon again. They had two golden opportunities, though, or three maybe, actually, at the final buzzer. Of course, Nneka Ogwumike coming up short on a shot she makes maybe 9 times out of 10, but it rolls off the rim and falls out of the reach of Candace Parker. Final buzzer sounds, and Chicago gets the win at home. But again, Chicago came alive, though, in that second half of play this afternoon. Again, you saw it just seemed like the pace went their way. They were more aggressive on the defensive end. They had very good internal offense this afternoon, too. Obviously, between feeding Dolson, feeding Boyette inside. And then once the three-point game got going between Sloot and Quigley, you knew that they had LA on their heels. Again, they knocked off that 10-point deficit. Again, they went ahead for a bit early in the first half, went back in the second half of play. Then LA went back in front, but then LA, for some reason went totally off key on offense and really did not decide to keep up their defensive intensity, minus Laimbeer, folks. I mean, obviously, AB's been the one constant variable in their defensive system, but again, they're still showing a lot of or some problems on the defense, and also rebounding was also a big factor, especially for the Sparks late in this ball game. Again, they came up empty on a steal by AB, had a jump ball go on inside their own end. They couldn't rebound a ball that was going out of bounds. That was still a one-point game, and that was a big rebound for Chicago. They had the ball go off their hands and out of bounds. That kept possessions alive for Chicago. So obviously the defense had a couple of lapses at the worst possible time this afternoon, and the rebounding was not there either for Los Angeles in the second half of the ball game. But other than that, obviously for the Sparks, no one is immune to immortality in the WNBA or any professional sport for that matter. You're bound to lose eventually, and obviously we saw Minnesota go down in flames in a pretty rough game against Connecticut earlier this year, and then LA falls to Chicago. So obviously, I think it was all ingrained in their minds that okay, we're not going to go this way. We're not going to go unbeaten the whole season at home. But still, though, this was a game though that perhaps much like Atlanta yesterday, like myself and Crystal talked about, probably though a game or a couple of possessions that LA would like to say, can we have a do-over or a redo? And obviously, can't do that in pro sports. But obviously, like I said, again, the rebounding was a bit of a factor late in the ball game. Presumably, some defensive lapses also a big component as well. And obviously, the big one that probably will be talked about for a bit is that final one, of course, where Stephanie Dolson is beyond the arc in the corner and buries an 8-ball corner pocket to end this one this afternoon. Todd Mintz writes in to say this is not that big of an upset. The Sparks are not going to win the West in the regular season. Something is missing, folks. The defense is not there as it was last season. And I think, Todd, more so, Todd, for Chicago's psyche at least, okay, you've gone in or you've hosted Minnesota and blew the brakes off of them by 20 at Allstate, and now you've knocked off the number 2 team and above all the defending WNBA champs as well in their own barn. So you've beaten Minnesota at home and then gone into Staples Center in front of a crowd of over 16,000 and knocked off the defending champs when they hadn't lost a game at home yet. 2 very critical, very big key wins, I think, for Chicago going forward in the season series, perhaps with the Lynx and the Sparks going forward, that could perhaps help them somewhat get off of the, get off the ground even better, perhaps later on in the season. Todd also says Chicago was not harassed. They got into a comfort zone except for a very few minutes. The fact is Chicago slowed the pace, controlled the tempo, and only pushed it when numbers were there. And I also want to probably point to that the Sky played much smarter and much more perhaps safer basketball, I guess, because they were very somewhat wild with their passes in the first half. That led to a lot of turnovers. And then I think more of a role reversal. It went from Chicago being sloppy on the offensive end or maybe on defense to Los Angeles going into lapses, either, long dry spells of no baskets, mental mistakes. Obviously, the over and back violation late in the game somewhat killed LA's momentum as well, between Sims and Parker having a minor brain lapse. Again, Parker not fully across the midcourt timeline. Ball gets passed back to her over the line. Heads up play by the officiating crew, ruling in an over and back violation. So obviously a lot of mental mistakes dooming LA in the second half, were more so looked like that was dooming Chicago in the first part of the ball game this afternoon. And once again, Chicago wins. Again, folks, very thrilling game. If you watch this game today on local TV, or if you were watching it at the game today at Staples Center or on League Pass, just a great game to be a part of. Obviously, a game that LA would like back, but of course, 2 teams, of course, jockeying for playoff positioning and what have you. Chicago wins at the final buzzer, basically 82-80 over Los Angeles this afternoon to snap the Sparks' 9-game home winning streak, and that now drops LA to 14-6. Chicago, now after a rough start, is now 8-13 and now tied for 10th right now, and not that far behind for the number 8 spot right now in the WNBA standings. The other game tonight, folks, the Fever and Stars hooked up from AT&T Center, and San Antonio blitzkriegs Indiana 85-61. The Fever on the back half of a back-to-back tonight. Tiffany Mitchell, 13 points, was the team high for scoring, and then Candice Dupree had 9, and that was it for the Fever this evening. Isabel Harrison, 18 points, and Kelsey Plum, career high 16 points for Plum this evening at San Antonio this evening. And Christy Wilson writes in to say hi. K-Dub, good to see you, and thanks for joining us tonight on the program. Okay, so for the Fever, folks, obviously, presumably road trip fatigue is probably what I'm going to say here with this loss. Obviously, getting drubbed by the bottom feeders right now in the WNBA standings of 85-61 to the Stars. But again, obviously, you can probably point to the box score and say this is why they lost. Again, like I said, Mitchell 13 points, Dupree 9 points, and that was it. Those are the only two leading scores for the Fever this evening. And then, of course, for the Stars, you look at it, they get both Harrison and Plum, 18 and 16 respectfully for the Stars. But obviously, the Fever, the last game of a road trip, back-to-back. I mean, back-to-backs normally kill teams in any professional sport, maybe minus baseball because they're used to playing back-to-back in consecutive games for that matter. But obviously, on a long road trip through the West Coast, obviously that time change going from Seattle to L.A., Phoenix, and then now to San Antonio. So you're going, roughly 4-game stretch on the road, all 4 games on the West Coast, and, somewhat coming out of it, again, pretty rough. Obviously, snapping that 5-game skid that they were on just last night or yesterday down in Phoenix. And then again, exerting all that energy again, playing all those games on the West Coast and at least pulling one win out for the Fever going forward should help the cause again yesterday. But obviously tonight was all about San Antonio. And again, they built a big lead, folks, in a very rare showing so far for this very young Stars team, getting a big lead, folks, but they hang on to it. And then also they really did a good job, though, I think this is probably San Antonio's best all-around game, tip-off to final buzzer. I think that you finally saw presumably Kelsey Plum's first big breakout game of her very rough go so far in her rookie campaign. Isabel Harrison playing great, too. And then also, I mean, what about Moriah Jefferson's amazing SportsCenter top 10 ultimate, pull back and fake out basket on the fast break tonight? The Stars really got out tonight, folks, and were able to run great post play too between along with De'Erica Hamby playing great, working well inside today. A lot of great, a lot of great things for the Stars today for them. Again, this is probably a building block game for this young team to somewhat, put those building blocks into place, and hopefully it works out sometime soon this evening. Again, the Stars win 85-61 to chalk up their 3rd win of the season. A couple of stuff here or some comments. We'll get to all this real quick. First from Christy Wilson, she says San Antonio was lit tonight. They played great. Again, K-Dub, like I said, this is a building block victory. I mean, obviously the Stars have had 3 wins in 21 games so far. So right now they're at one more win, and they're going to get at least one more win, and they're not going to come close to 3-31. But Christy, tonight, like I said, was probably their best all-around performance from opening tip to final buzzer again, and seeing, seeing what this Stars team can bring to the table when everything finally does this. Hopefully sooner than later for this team. But again, Plum, breakout game. Harrison improving in various areas. Mo Jeff, top 10 play, amazing play that had us going wild today on Twitter and hopefully on SportsCenter tonight. Hamby also playing great inside as well. So the 4 main components of the Stars team, the whole team showed up today and they showed out and played a great game this evening. Todd wrote to Christy saying, "What's up?" He also says, had San Antonio winning. One thing that Vicky's team has not quit after they fall apart in Atlanta. They were ready tonight. This assures they will not finish with the worst record ever. Just brought that up. Christy says, back-to-backs are a killer in the NBA. There's been talk about them reducing the number of back-to-back games, which with the NBA, at least what I heard, hopefully this could perhaps go with the W pretty soon too. 6-game preseason now for the NBA, and the season's been moved up about 3 weeks, I want to say, to October 17th this year. So maybe that could change. That change could come to the NBA to perhaps avoid more and more of these perhaps as well. As Todd mentioned again, the Stars, 1 win away to avoid Tulsa's worst record ever. All the media that has bagged so bad on Kelsey Plum, you have to give rookies time. Not always going to be a piece of cake. Todd, I agree 100% because obviously, I mean, having watched Kelsey's whole career from her time here in San Diego at La Jolla Country Day High School in the shadow of Candace Wiggins playing down here at Country Day High, then going to Washington, of course. I mean, obviously, there's many players I think in every sport that we can think of, whether it's been Plum, whether it's been Vince Young in the NFL, whether it's been Ryan Leaf in the NFL, perhaps with my former love of the Chargers many years ago, of guys or players that had sensational careers back in their high school days or their college days, but did not have a very good start or did not have a good career in the pros. And obviously, Plum is going to have a great career. But again, but Todd, though, I think when you come into the league, though, with so much pressure and accolades and records as Plum did at Washington, there's more pressure added, I think, by the player, his or herself, to live up to all these expectations and the pressure from the fans, from the media, from everyone from everyone watching these players play. And obviously, yes, I think has the media attention towards Plum been a bit much? Yes. Is it deserved? In ways, yes and no. But again, Todd, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, not like this, not snap of a finger or with a magic wand is someone's career just going to go like this from the get-go. They're going to go through peaks and valleys, ups and downs. And Plum, so far, I think has handled, the rough stretch, her rough start to her career and the pressure. I think she's handled it very, very well so far. And again, this can only be, as I've said plenty of times in this block already, this is a building block game for every member of the Stars right now, players and coaches. So now it's a matter of, when, not if, but when will they continue to keep building those blocks up, to make a nice little pyramid perhaps sometime very, very soon. Christy also says Kelsey did very nice, very impressed. And she also said Mo Jeff is a beast. I mean, obviously, the play, folks, I mean, please go and visit the WNBA Twitter handle. We've shared it on our network Twitter handle. If you have not seen the play, folks, go check it out. I mean, obviously, Shay Murphy, good friend of mine, loved her reaction on the bench when Mo Jeff made that play, so go check it out. Todd says about the Fever, cannot score enough to make the postseason. Again, obviously, for right now at least, I mean, obviously, I don't want to make excuses about the road trip. Team, do not want to go there. I mean, obviously, it's part of the season where you're going to go on those long stretches away from home. Obviously, tonight, though, they were getting good looks, but just could not tickle the twine. They had them roll off the rim or they missed the easy looks or what have you, or the shots that normally fall on a good day didn't fall. And today was an example of a rough day at the office for a team shooting the ball. Again, Mitchell had 13 points and Dupree had 9. Mitchell with 13 points was the team leader in scoring. So it was one of those nights that, again, presumably, again, as we said, the back-to-back and going from Phoenix yesterday, winning that game 84-77, and they barely can get above 60 tonight. So again, you saw it right there again, going from one great game to one of those bad nights at the office. So again, the Fever, obviously, having a rough go this evening. At this point in time. Going to Christy once more, she said the Fever need to make a trade, but I have no idea who is out there that could help them out. Obviously, the deadline coming up, I want to say sometime either early next month, I think, or after the All-Star game. Forget the actual date for that, sadly. But perhaps one player. I mean, I don't know who that missing link is or what their biggest need is, obviously. I know that Pokey Chapman probably has a plan in place of if they do need to get somebody in regards to depth or roster procurement, but obviously maybe a move. I mean, who really knows what they could do, but we'll see what does happen, though, presumably with this in motion right now. Todd says the Fever normally have struggled to even get to 70 or 75 points. It is why I think Chicago overtakes Indy very, very soon. Well, as long as the Sky keep playing the way they have been playing, man, they are going to be it's going to be a very fun second half of the season to watch very, very soon when we do get back to action on Tuesday here for the WNBA. And again, folks, 2 games today. The Sky over the Sparks, 82-80. A final score against Stephanie Dawson hit the game-winning basket, a three-pointer that was made with 13.7 to go in regulation time after the Sky erased a 10-point deficit in the second half of play, and then the Stars mopped the floor clean with the Fever, 85-67. All right, folks, as we now reach the first half break, this is the first half standings for you folks going as follows. Minnesota, number 1 overall, 16-2. Los Angeles, 14-6 in second place. Connecticut and Washington are tied for third, 12-9, but the Sun, though, are in third by virtue of, I want to say, by percentage points over the Mystics. So, again, Con and Washington tied at 12-9. Phoenix in 5th, 11-9. New York, 10-9. Dallas in 7th place, 10-12. They played the most games in the entire league at 22 games already. And Atlanta right now is tied with Seattle for 8th at 9-11. But the Dream have the 8th spot via percentage points as well. The Fever and Sky are currently tied for 10th at 8-13. And then the Stars are 3-18 right now at this point in time. So again, Minnesota, LA, Connecticut, Washington, Phoenix, New York, Dallas, Atlanta, 1 through 8, Seattle, Indiana, Chicago, and San Antonio, 9 through 12. If the WNBA playoffs began right here and now at 9:50 p.m. PDT on this Thursday night, the Lynx and Sparks would have 2-round byes to the semifinals, much like last year. The Sun and Mystics would have 1-round byes to the second round of the postseason. It would be the Mercury and Dream 5 versus 8 in Phoenix in the first single elimination game. And then the Liberty would host Dallas in the 6 versus 7 matchup, also a single elimination affair. Should, depending on the, and of course, depending on what does happens, the lowest remaining seed would then face the Mystics, while the highest or the lowest remaining seed would face Connecticut, with the highest remaining seed facing Washington, and vice versa once we get to the WNBA League semifinals. So again, if it did start today once more, Phoenix, Atlanta, 5 versus 8, New York, and Dallas. Dallas being on the road 7 versus 6. Highest remaining of those 4 goes and plays against Connecticut. Lowest would go, highest would go and face, would go from there with it again, with the playoff format being reseeded after every matchup. So again, 8 versus 5, 6 versus 7 for the opening round matchup. So again, Mercury, Dream, and the Wings and Liberty would be your first round playoff matchups, with the Mystics, Sun, Sparks, and Lynx all waiting in the wings for those teams, if in fact the playoffs did start today. All right, folks, to dive into some more of the somewhat going team by team now here to get the first half season recap going on at this point real quick as well. Ty wanted to say, need to add that Seattle is in big trouble after the break, 5 in a row on the road, and obviously starting off playing in Los Angeles after the All-Star break does conclude for the Storm, the host team in city, for this year's All-Star Game festivities. With that, folks, some thoughts real quick for all 12 teams so far. We'll start going bottom to top. And again, we'll start with San Antonio at number 12 right now. They are, again, 3-18. Again, obviously, we touched base on the Stars in the last block here, folks, again. To somewhat, I guess, throw some thoughts out there real quick. Probably a team underachieving right now. I'm sure that we probably were thinking earlier in the offseason, with them getting Kelsey Plum, that they would probably be somewhere, probably not in the playoff mix, but at least, somewhere close by in the neighborhood. But obviously, the long losing streak to begin the season did not help matters for San Antonio. Again, 3-18 so far. They need at least one win to elude the 3-31 record set by the Tulsa Shock for the worst record in WNBA league history at 3-31 a few seasons ago. Will the Stars win another game? I think has been a talking point, I think, as well, or more so of when the Stars were looking to get their first win. They're bound to at least probably win at least 3 more. Probably maybe more than 3 for all that I know. I'm sure that, like I said a while back, I think back here on June 28th, I want to say, when we were talking about the Stars and the long losing streak, they're bound to win a couple of games in garbage time when teams like either Los Angeles or Minnesota or someone that's locked into a playoff spot is going to rest their star players. And they're bound to at least win a couple of those games in garbage time. But I think, though, that after today's game, with the break coming up, a chance for them to somewhat sit back or not really sit back, but I think probably, evaluate where they're at. Now, I mean, does Vicki Johnson presumably look and see what's in? Probably. I think this is also a good chance, though, for Vicki Johnson to somewhat sit back and look things over for the first half of the season, and then going forward and saying, or at least putting into place, of what lineup rotations work and which ones don't work. And obviously tonight, their lineup rotation, starting 5, worked out this evening. So I think it's a matter, though, I mean, again, this is probably a year, though, the Stars were somewhat taking off, I guess, from winning games. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a tank job by any means necessary. Just for the fact that there's no veteran leadership on this team, in reality, there's really no established vets, minus Erica De Souza. But again, she's somewhat been very ineffective after her time in Atlanta, brief time in Chicago, then in San Antonio. But again, this is a good chance, though, to further see how this young core of talent and this nucleus of talent is going to perform for the remainder of the season for the Stars. But I would say, though, they probably are somewhat near expectations for the season. The Chicago Sky folks, in my mind, at 8-13 and 11th place, are probably a bit below expectations. But obviously, when you lose 2 star players, and going back to this a little bit, but again, losing 2 star players in back-to-back seasons between both Sylvia Fowles a couple years ago, holding out and being demanded to be traded to Minnesota was one blow. Della Don's absence in the 2014 finals, of course, with her back problem, again, giving her props for gutting that out still, but then losing her to the finger injury last year, and then a lot of offseason turmoil, and her also forcing her way out to Washington. And really, though, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, though, if we could really say, though, that they're below expectations. I think I probably only said that or say that because they've been in the playoff mix for the past couple seasons, and again getting to the semifinals last season. But still, though, I think this last wave of games, though, obviously today's game stands out. The blowout of Minnesota stands out, and this winning streak, though, I think as well, also I think somewhat gives Chicago a boost. But now it's a matter, though, of will the momentum carry over after the break? I mean, obviously, probably. I mean, I know, folks, about Amber Stocks again, and she's had a rough go, and again, somewhat being on a learning curve, going from being an assistant for such a long time to a head coach and GM. But someone like Vicki Johnson, she saw the day about how good her team can play or has played, but also who works good with this person and who doesn't work well with certain players is also a big contributing factor for this first-year head coach. Now, obviously, can the Sky keep this going? If they keep doing what they've done the past 5 games with these wins, obviously the OT victory in Seattle, obviously a heartbreaking double OT loss to Dallas a couple of games ago. But still, though, they've shown very good improvement over the past couple of games and weeks. Now it's a matter of that momentum, though, carrying over for them. But in regards to being at or near or below expectations, I'd say they're probably a bit below. But improvement, though, on the way for them coming up very, very soon. Christy Wilson writes in to say trading EDD was, in my opinion, a bad idea. And also saying that Chicago really has no leadership. Obviously, who do you look to? I mean, obviously, Cappy Pondexter, established veteran, obviously missing the past couple of games with concussion protocol, would be one that I would look for or look towards for veteran leadership. Tamara Young somewhat could be a vet, could be a leader in my mind as well. So at least there's, I mean, Cap for sure, because, I mean, Cap's been around, this is not her first rodeo in the WNBA. So definitely Cap is a vet, but it's a matter, though, of when of her health, I think. I mean, she's been beat up the past couple of games, of course, with the concussion issue, but again, some missed time as well earlier for injuries. I think there was well that Chicago definitely as well. They have at least one leader, but I think, though, still, though, a lot of young talent who's growing into becoming leaders very, very soon. I would even throw Jessica Breland in that mix, too, about veteran leadership again. Her personal story, of course, battling illness, but also I think she's been established enough to be a vet as well. So I think that those two at least, and plus T Young as well, also a good thing as well. Todd writes in to say, I think that all coaches in the league except I am doing a good job with what they have. Vicky and Amber are making progress with their teams. And again, 2 teams, as we said at the open, Todd, of this block, rough starts of the season, but they have somewhat picked things up a little bit. Again, not a whole lot of improvement, but at least Chicago's shown some life. The Stars have been in pretty much every game, but a couple of blowouts that they've had. They've been in most of the games. They haven't, and they've refused to quit. But they've done a good job, too, staying in games as well for the most part this season. Moving over now to the Indiana Fever, who's also 8-13, and they're tied right now for 10th with the Chicago Sky. The Fever, I think, folks, there's a bit of pressure. Again, they have not missed the postseason since entering the league as an expansion team back in the early 2000s. And Pokey Chapman, I think, folks, considering, again, going from one team to another, considering, again, there's no team at catchings this season, has somewhat done a pretty good job so far for the Fever this season. Obviously, Candace Dupree, though, folks, is a great player. I mean, she's been that way, was that way in her time in Phoenix. Again, was a game changer down there with the Mercury during those couple of title runs that they had a couple years ago in that amazing 2014 season. But the Fever, at least right now, I think they're also somewhat a little bit below expectations. I think that we had Indy in the mix. They've been in the mix, I think, every single year. They have like a very impressive consecutive playoff appearance streak going on still. And right now that's in jeopardy right now. But I think, though, as mentioned, the Fever and again, Christy Wilson said that maybe a trade perhaps maybe for Indiana could perhaps bolster their team. But I think, though, that Erica Wheeler's play, I think, cannot go underestimated. Again, we brought her up, I think, at least once per show these past couple of weeks. And her development has been sensational so far for the Fever. And it's given them another weapon outside of Dupree and January and Orlana Larkins when she's been playing and other players on this Indiana ball club. And now it's a matter, though, of will it all click? And obviously, Wheeler's played great in stretches. Dupree's been pretty consistent for the most part in the past couple of games and weeks being mentioned, but with Wheeler and Tiff Mitchell and Dupree, Larkins and those four is all a good combination. But it's a matter, though, of maybe one more score for the Fever would really help them out at this point for Indy. To the Seattle Storm, they're currently tied for 8th right now with the Dream at 9-11, but they are right now outsiders looking in for the Storm so far right now. Obviously, the play of Jewel Lloyd, Brianna Stewart, and the early their cohesiveness, folks, is second to none right now in the league, and they're developing something that I think is going to be a very scary force to be reckoned with very, very soon. But however, though, they have, swoon a bit, though, somewhat of a bit of a midseason scuffle, 5 losses here lately at this point for the Storm. I think it's a matter, though, of Sue Bird will take this team to where they want to go. I still think, though, that even with Stewie and Lloyd's play, this team, though, is still Sue Bird's team for right now. And it's a matter, though, of how far can Birdie take the Storm this season? Outside of Brianna Stewart and Jewel Lloyd, Sue Bird, though, folks, still runs everything up there for that Storm team on the court right now. And it's a matter, though, of how far can she carry this team right now. I think that right now Seattle's probably at expectations. I think that perhaps, their late season surge last year was great. Again, they got in the mix last year after a couple of down years, of course, the past couple of years. But they're not that deep in trouble. I mean, again, they're virtually locked up for 8th right now with the Dream. Obviously, they're outside looking in right now in the postseason party. But, hey, one win here and a loss by ATL, boom, you're back in the playoff mix right then and there. Couple of thoughts real quick from Tom Mintz. He says he thinks Seattle is underachieving. For clarity, they need a center. Obviously, Crystal Langhorn, I mean, she's played great, but still, though, in this day and age, though, the WNBA, where we're seeing more and more 6'4", 6'5", 6'7", 6'8" centers now, and obviously throwing Langhorn into the mix at roughly 6'1", 6'2", that really has been, I mean, at least I thought, and I think KT also thought a little bit, many years ago on the network, that we kind of thought that was a bit of a recipe for disaster playing Langhorn at that center spot. And obviously they do, though, I think could probably, that's probably a very good point, TM, is perhaps an upgraded center would be probably the one big move that needs to be made by the Storm, is perhaps some more depth at that center position. I definitely agree with that point at this point in time. Todd Mintz also says, it's my feeling that if Jenny Busick cannot pull off a deal for a center, even a unheralded backup on another roster, would be better off starting Carolyn Swords and having Alicia Clark come off the bench. While Swords may not be, while Swords is not agile enough, she lumbers, but she is not a bench player. She was utilized better under Laimbeer because they would go to her early, score a couple of baskets, and work well with Tina and crash the boards. Would start Langhorn, Stewart, and Swords together. Obviously, and again, as we've said with the Storm, with the Stars and Sky, Todd, at this point, again, perhaps this is another chance for a coach to look and evaluate again, for the third time this block here, what works and what doesn't work. Obviously, we in the media, or fans for that matter, we probably see things a bit differently from the stands, or from press row, or from your TV tray with your computer on it, sitting on your bed at your house, maybe, that you see things differently. And again, obviously that three player mix that Todd brought up again of Stewie, Langhorne, and Swords together. Could that work from our perspective? Yeah, but again, we're not being paid salary like Jenny Busick is to coach this team. But obviously, Jen probably is going to look at that and say, okay, let's give this a whirl next game, and we'll see how it works. They may even work on that in practice after the All-Star break does end. So obviously, presumably, in my view, for both the Fever and Storm, they're probably one move away from getting themselves back on track. Now that the Atlanta Dream, folks, is also 9-11, but they are right now in the playoff mix so far. There's actually a very good point, real quick. One very good point from Christy Wilson. Lauren Jackson definitely not walking through the door anytime soon. I would agree with that aspect 100%, because obviously, it's tough, though, I think, in any pro sport, Christy, to replace that franchise player. Lauren Jackson, many years with the Storm. Lisa Leslie was tough to replace for a bit with the Sparks. Obviously going to be very tough to replace Diana Taurasi when she retires. Same thing with Seattle. Looking at other sports, perhaps. At least their Lakers, at least, very good one to bring up. Been tough to replace Kobe Bryant, of course, with the Lake Show lately, and obviously, a very good point about Lauren Jackson not walking through anytime soon with the Storm on that aspect. But now to the Dream, folks. In spite of the record, folks, hear me out here. I think they have probably exceeded our expectations. I say that because they had a great fast start to the season. Yeah, they drifted off a bit, folks, but all this without Angel McCoughtry. And again, I know that we all had question marks, red flags about ATL and their roster without Angel, with Angel's absence. But Tiffany Hayes has played phenomenal this season. So she's going to the All-Star game. Laisha Clarendon, now a normal starting five-member or starting lineup player now for ATL after coming off the bench for her first part of her career in Indiana. Sensational season for Lay. A good friend of mine, too, but also she's played great for Atlanta as well. But again, I think we were a bit concerned, though, about where Atlanta would go. And they played great for the first couple months of the year. But again, much like everybody else, they hit a bit of a rough patch in the road. And again, they're 9-11, and right now tied for 8th right now in the standings, and holding on right now via percentage points to that last playoff berth right now. But they have been impressive, though, in spite of what we may have thought as outsiders looking into Atlanta. Obviously, Tip Hayes, sensational season, going to the All-Star game. Clarendon, now in your regular starting five lineup now for them. And how can we forget Brittany Sykes? She's come on the past game, past week, past couple weeks even, and has established herself as a player to be, as a force to be reckoned with. So obviously, Elizabeth Williams, too, has also played great, also into the All-Star game. So 4 great players right there, folks, for ATL. And again, they've 2 games below 500, yeah. But again, all this without Angel McCoughtry. And again, if Angel was to somehow, or if Angel, perhaps hypothetical situation, if Angel pulled a Candace Parker and came back for the second half of the season, if she did it, or would do it if she did. If she came back to Atlanta right now, just judging on paper, that would give Atlanta, a boost and could probably vault them, depending on how the other teams in front of them play. If Angel was to pull a Candace Parker and come back halfway through the season, that could have or could give ATL a very big boost going forward into the second half of the season. Christy agrees with ATL, very impressive. Todd thinks, he says, Michael Cooper, amazing job the last 2 years. All of us had Atlanta last year as how could they win a game. He has kept them very competitive and has developed players. And again, Brittany Sykes, Todd, is a perfect example of that right now. Again, she's established herself in the last game that they played and has really come on late. And again, Tip Hayes, Clarendon, Williams, and then Sykes. So again, I think Coop has done a good job. And again, we're somewhat wondering, though, if Michael had any LA magic left over from his time in Los Angeles when he came back to coach Atlanta. Again, got them to the finals a couple of years ago, losing to Minnesota. And then this year, again, without Angel playing, done a great job. And again, I think it'd be pretty incredible or amazing, I think, if Angel did come back to this team in the second half of the season, if she did come back, of what this could do for this Atlanta ball club right now. So again, good stuff from Michael Cooper. And again, I agree with Christy Wilson, ATL, very, very impressive. And again, I think they probably exceeded our expectations right now at this point in time. The Dallas Wings, folks, have played 22 games, the most amongst any team right now in the league. They're 10-12 right now and currently hold the 7th spot in the league standings. And Dallas, they're still, I think, a year away from being a really big, potent force to be reckoned with, obviously. I don't know, though, folks, we can say enough good things about how great Skylar Diggins-Smith has bounced back from her injury a couple years ago, obviously. Was not the same player the past couple seasons, but this year, probably in a way, folks, has somewhat changed her game to somewhat compensate for that injury. But I think she could probably be a very good candidate. If there was a comeback player of the year, perhaps this year coming off that injury. She's played great, but it's a matter, though, of will Glojo and Diggins-Smith have a bit of some scoring reinforcement. I think it's probably the biggest thing outside of Glojo and Skylar has been the production or scoring production behind them. Obviously, they've had some rough goes this season. Obviously, they've somewhat taken their growing pains too this season. But for Dallas, though, I'd probably say they're probably at expectations for this season at least. Again, they're probably maybe another year away, perhaps, from probably having, dominant seasons of the old Detroit Shock days maybe. But for right now, between what we've seen with Skylar, Glory Johnson, the other cast of characters down there, they're probably at or maybe just above exceeding expectations so far this season for Dallas at this point again. And also, they played 22 games. So they've already played the brunt of their schedule. They only have roughly 11 or 12 left to go for the season so far at this point for Dallas. But again, 10-12 so far. And again, everyone below them or above them, obviously, is either so everyone, at least in Dallas's sake, if you're looking at the standings right now, you've got New York, Phoenix, Connecticut. You have New York and Phoenix, all barely a game or so over 500. And you're 2 games below 500. So right now, that middle part of the standings right now, in the middle half of the conference so far, is still within striking distance for Dallas. And I think, though, that obviously, for me, the biggest thing, though, is more scoring production outside of Diggins, Smith, and Glory Johnson right now at this point in time. Todd says, Dallas, to me, is over expectations a bit. They have been some games they have looked good. And Christy says, Skylar Diggins-Smith has played well so far this season. Todd says, the rookies have done well. I thought arguments for me could have been Christmas Kelly or Glory Johnson deserving an all-star berth over Simone Augustus. Obviously, Moan's reputation, Todd, as you had brought up, though, plenty of times, too, of Moan's track record, of course, being a big reason. But presumably if there's any more roster moves made, more roster moves made for the All-Star game by Saturday, who knows, maybe one of those two do, in fact, slip in there for the All-Star game itself. Moving now, folks, to the New York Liberty. Of course, the Libs in 6th place right now. They would host Dallas in the opening round match of the playoffs. They're 10-9. Right now, the Liberty, they are far below expectations. I think right now, presumably, what I would probably even say from Liberty fans, probably some very unacceptable basketball being played the past couple of weeks for the Liberty. And again, as we brought up here, folks, plenty of times on the network again, is presumably we are again seeing another year of Tina Charles burning out. Now, again, obviously, that was just the first half of the season. But once more, I think, though, that while Tina has been, the main player in New York, though, she has had a couple of cast members. Sugar Rogers, cannot say enough great things about Sugar, and congrats to her for finally going to the All-Star team or All-Star game this year for New York. Great season for her. Shavonte Zealous has been there from time to time. But I think, though, much like Dallas, New York needs more scoring production outside of Tina Charles. And again, Tina has had another rock-solid, perfect, phenomenal season. But again, I don't think, though, that the burden of scoring should fall solely on her shoulders. And again, I think, though, that Sugar Rogers has done a good job of compensating along with Shavonte Zellis. But much like Dallas, there needs to be more scoring production outside of those three players for New York at this point right now, for the Liberty. And they somewhat have been a bit tough to read, I think. Obviously, they played great in spurts at home. And obviously against some of the bigger teams or better teams like Phoenix, Los Angeles, they floundered against those bigger and better teams so far. I mean, New York is still good. I mean, New York is going to be in the middle of this, but it's a matter, though, of when will it be somebody other than Tina Charles for a change leading the way in scoring? Or when will someone else step up in a big situation to somewhat alleviate the pressure off of Tina Charles so far at this point in time? Todd is pretty much on point. He says there's no harder team in the league right now to read than New York. And I agree, though, and presumably, Todd, I mean, obviously, you know, is Bill Laimbeer the right fit still? Is the right fit still on the bench? Honestly, I think Bill should have been gone many years ago. I think when he brought back most of his old Detroit players like Cap and Pondexter, and they were dwindling in the bottom half of the conference, and I made a running joke on the network about the Liberty being a WNBA retirement home for those players, is I thought Bill should have been gone maybe 3 or 4 seasons ago, and obviously the Liberty bringing him back to the fray and I mean, he's had a couple of good years recently, but I think, though, Bill probably should have been gone a couple seasons ago, to be very honest, and just at least thinking about this the past couple of times, seeing the Liberty play. They're tough to read, Todd. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think more so it falls, though, on the lack of scoring production outside of Tina Charles. Maybe maybe Bill's coaching probably falls in there somewhere in the chain reaction of stuff, but I still think, though, that it's still, though, falls, though, on scoring production so far at this point in time. At this point, Christy Wilson says, no. She says Sugar Rogers has played great. Tuttle says the play and intensity at the Garden over the road games is night and day. Bria Hartley had one very good road game against Connecticut. Rebecca Allen, and Kia Stokes seems to do great at home. Todd also wants to say Bill won't be going anywhere, so that is irrelevant. Todd also says many like Katie Smith, but it would really have to fall apart. Not as long as Isaiah Thomas is president. You know, Todd, I agree. I mean, obviously, I think we all knew, though, a couple years ago that when MSG hired Isaiah Thomas to work with the Liberty, that you knew, though, that Isaiah was going to keep Bill Laimbeer or keep his former teammate in the loop. So obviously, that was in the old studio. I mean, that show was in the old studio. That was when I had shorter hair. That was when I was just back from Hawaii, and we had a 2-hour show that night, Todd. So obviously, that was just a running joke I made. But obviously, that was just my side of the story. But obviously, you knew, though, that when Isaiah Thomas was involved with the Liberty, that he was going to keep his buddy around, his former teammate around, for that matter, back in the day. So obviously, Bill Laimbeer probably not going to go anywhere anytime soon, unless, like Todd said, though, unless everything just absolutely hits the fan and goes haywire outside of that. The Phoenix Mercury, folks, 11-9 in 5th place right now. The Mercury, obviously, the Brittany Griner injury does not help matters. And obviously, we saw that firsthand yesterday, whether it was a big deal or not. Obviously, the Mercury losing to Indiana yesterday, 84-77. Phoenix, I think, there's still something missing. And obviously, that was even before Brittany Griner's injury. And again, folks, I know it's team sports, folks, but still, though, in the recent couple of years, if you think back to Diggins' injury with Tulsa, you think back to Candace Parker sitting out in 2015, of how one player's absence really can hurt a team in a team sport. And again, I know it's not that big of a deal, folks, but just seeing it at least the past couple of years, Tulsa, LA 2015, and now Phoenix this year with Griner's injury, is in a way very small, microscopic, at least in my opinion, folks, and I've seen it firsthand playing sports, is it really does bring a team down. I remember firsthand, folks, in 2011 when I was hurt and ineligible grade-wise in baseball, that brought my whole team down for 6 whole weeks. We struggled from game to game because my bat and my glove wasn't in the lineup on the baseball field because, for one, I had very bad grades that year, dealing with personal problems and also being injured on top of it all. And that brought my whole team down for 6 whole weeks. So obviously, I know that obviously, we probably shouldn't be saying, it's a team sport. That's not a big factor, folks. If you look at it again, Tulsa with Diggins' injury in 2015, Candace Parker sitting out in 2015 with Los Angeles, and then now with Griner's injury, it's hurt. And obviously it has hurt because now, much like New York, that burden of scoring now falls on Diana Taurasi's shoulders. And again, we saw yesterday, 34 points for DT. The next closest score for Phoenix had 12. So again, obviously, no tall body. Now, obviously, now again, and to somewhat, do this for me, what I said about the Angel Robinson signing back earlier in last month again about it being a safety net at center spot or being a safety net for Brittany Griner. Here's your chance to see it now, folks. Now, obviously, Kayla George worked in at center a couple of possessions or during the stretch of time when Griner got hurt. But again, so you have George. But again, hey, pat myself on the back. You now have Angel Robinson to compensate, hopefully, perhaps, for Brittany Griner's injury. But again, much like New York and Dallas is now, who's going to help Diana Taurasi carry that load now? Again, obviously, like I said, the scoring discrepancy, again, 34 points for D, 12 points for the next closest score for Phoenix yesterday. So now it's a matter of what's going to happen and how can Phoenix, and how will the Mercury bounce back after both the loss to go to the All-Star break and then how they come and play after the All-Star break, as well as also a very big talking point as well. Todd says real quick, the question for him is how far will Phoenix slip in the next 3 weeks? Can they fall out of the top 8 altogether? I sense they hang on to the top 8, but it makes for conversation. Todd, at least with them being in the 5 spot, so they're right now middle. They're middle right now. Can they hold it for the next 3 to 4 weeks or 3 weeks at least, Todd? Looking over again, so you got New York behind them by a game, Dallas by a game, and ATL and Seattle by 2 games right now at this point. Even right now, I think even if Phoenix was to flounder the next couple of games, they'll still hang on to at least 8. Because I think right now that with how Seattle and ATL has played these past couple of games and stretches, Indiana suffering a setback today, and with Chicago playing great, Phoenix could perhaps be 8, but could be in trouble. I mean, I agree with you on that, but I still think that they're probably going to be in that top 8 area, and we'll see how far they can get, basically. Christy says, DT is great, but she cannot do it all by herself. And again, like I said, that scoring discrepancy, folks, was awful. Again, 34 for her, and again, 12 for the next closest player in their loss yesterday. The Washington Mystics are 4th right now. They're 12-9. At least right now, they are above expectations. But, folks, if you recall best, when Todd and I were together on August 8th of 2015 at Honda Center in Anaheim when we did the show there from the press box, Todd flat out said, and I agree with him still, can you do it in the postseason? And obviously, it's been a part of the Mystics' track record for many, many years. They've done well in the regular season, but have bombed out and flaked and gone up in flames and have bombed out and lost in the postseason when it counts the most. Now, obviously, Deladon and Tolliver going to Washington helped that team somewhat get 2 franchise stars for the first time. And again, folks, not a knock on the Mystics, but again, probably the first time in a long time in Washington franchise history, they finally have franchise superstar players in both Deladon, Tolliver, and I'll even throw Ivory Lotta in that mix too for franchise player. But again, looking back over the track record of the Mystics, they're much like the Padres, losing in the World Series twice. My former favorite NFL team, losing in the Super Bowl in '94. They were much like the LA Kings in '93, losing in the playoffs or losing in the finals, at least to Montreal. They're much like the Jazz, the Suns, for that matter, losing in the postseason or even in the finals for many years. So it's a matter of them doing well in the regular season, but again, that $1 million question, can you do it for me in the playoffs. Time will tell with Washington, but again, I think, though, that they're above the expectations. And I think, though, probably surprising a lot of people, though, too, because they're number 4 right now in the mix right now for the league standings right now at this point in time. The Connecticut Sun folks, also 12-9, they're in third place, and they have a one-round bye right now. But Sun folks, stupid question, but at least with this right now, the Sun far exceeding expectations in flying colors right now. Unbelievable turnaround for this organization right now, and Kurt Miller has done something very, very special. And by the way, folks, I forgot to mention yesterday, but folks, big ups to Kurt Miller, folks. He was actually named to replace Bill Laimbeer for the All-Star game coaching-wise. Bill has a very important family matter to attend to, and we hope and pray for the best for Bill and his family right now with the situation. But, folks, the Sun, like I said yesterday, folks, they are intriguing. They are fun. And this has been an incredible ride for those fans in Uncasville. Again, they are, again, in flying colors above all expectations. And again, folks, this is that one rare moment in pro sports, any level, where a trade has worked for both parties involved. Again, folks, that draft day trade made last year, the Sparks sending Jonquel Jones to the Sun, and the Sun sending Chelsea Gray to Los Angeles, a trade that has worked and has done wonders for both teams this season, with the Sun and Jonquel Jones at the All-Star game playing out of her mind these past few weeks, and then Chelsea Gray putting herself on the map in the postseason last year, and then having 4 or 5 outstanding games this season. But the Sun specifically, folks, here's a team that for the past couple of years was the doormat of the league. And folks, just imagine, mind blow, grenade explosion. Just think about next season when the Sun gets Shanae Ogwumike back. Holy cow. That team is going to be fun to go and see next season at this point in time. Looking things over real quick for Christy Wilson for the Mystics real quick, or for the Sun. She says the Sun are doing amazing. What a turnaround. But Todd says about the Mystics, he says, I don't see it. Ivory Laud and KT are too small of a backcourt to win any title, although we all love them both as players. Defensively, and mismatches are going to be exploited without Taylor Hill, who's done for the season. Again, Todd, you brought this up on October 8th of 2015 at Honda Center. You said about Washington, man, and I know it well. But again, you and I agree here. But it's a matter though of what will you do in the postseason. Again, if they get in, Todd, I know you'll probably see it, and I agree. I don't see them getting very far though, regardless if they get in the playoffs at this point in time right now. And Todd says about the Sun, he says, I was one of the few who over a year ago said they were the team of the immediate future. You could see even last year the Sun had a lot of young, very explosive talented players. And then Christy says when Shanae comes back, Sun will be a dangerous team. The Los Angeles Sparks, folks, 14-6 in second place. They have a 2-round bye right now to the postseason party. Obviously, folks, for LA, somewhat of championship hangover. Again, I talked about this when after the Mercury won in 2014 again. And I think, folks, this is evident, I think, in every sport. College level, pro level, after you win a title, folks, and someone get that championship hangover playing all those games. But still, folks, for the Sparks, they're right at it. They're probably right at, maybe a little bit below expectations right now. Again, obviously, trying to figure out how you're going to fill the void of Christy Tolliver. Again, obviously, Odyssey Sims trade. Raquanda Williams has played good in spurts and what have you. But obviously, still, folks, some stuff for LA to iron out. As I mentioned back in the game recap block again, rebounding a bit of a factor this afternoon. Mental mistakes in the ball game late in the game today. And also defensive lapses in certain situations. And also a matter, though, of when LA will get a lead and not relinquish it again. Folks, obviously with LA, it's a matter, though, of you can play with fire so many times, but it's a matter of time of when will you get burned. And today was a very good example of LA playing with fire too much and getting burnt to a crisp today. But still, though, hey, obviously, you've got the MVP in Candace Parker. MVP in Nneka Ogwumike, finals MVP in Candace Parker, at least, and the 6th woman of the year in Janta Lavender. LA is going to be fine going forward. Just a matter, though, of how they will play against Minnesota going forward for the next 2 games, at least, and obviously getting plastered in Minnesota earlier this month didn't help the cause. But now you have 2 more shots against them, and obviously they'll be up there going forward in the playoff mix so far of this season. Christy Wilson says, championship hangover happens a lot, specifically in the NFL. Still, I think the Sparks will be fine. Title says laid out on the web today. Very thorough second-half preview. Slated they were not going to catch the Lynx, but the homestand of 12 days was a chance to really get close with that. And obviously, losing game 1 to Minnesota doesn't help. So now there's a lot more riding on game 2 when they play the Lynx in regards to if they win that one, then win the next 2. They've got the season series, and they have the tiebreaker. In fact, they do, end up tie with Minnesota. They get that number 1 spot. But that's a matter. But also, it's a matter though of, tightening some screws though that again somewhat came loose today in the ball game. Todd also says the biggest thing though is the Sparks are not breaking teams down the season with forcing tons of pressure so far, and really though, probably I think also Todd, lack of somewhat of a small lack of urgency, specifically late in the ball game today. They really weren't forcing the issue or playing pressure defense when they were losing by a couple of points in the winning minutes of the ball game. They thought I think, as I said, they were playing too much with fire. And again, they got burnt today and they ended up losing on their home floor this afternoon, and also not a whole lot of scoring in transition. So obviously a couple of pointers to work out during the couple of weeks. For the Minnesota Lynx at 16-2 on the season, number 1 overall, also a 2-round bye. Obviously, folks, that the Lynx were going to be, on their revenge tour for losing in the finals last year, above all on their home floor, and they were going to play with a chip on their shoulder. Now, obviously, 16-2 at the break, impressive stuff again from this Lynx team again, who really, has been the cream of the crop since 2011 in the WNBA for the past 6 seasons. And I think, though, more importantly, at least for the Lynx, I think the only minor cog or chink in their armor is the age and the fatigue factor towards the roster right now still is the minor thing for this very scary team. Again, Christy Wilson said scary team. I mean, they're going to be a scary team again, and they're going to be one for a while. But again, still, though, that, fatigue, folks, may not sound like a big deal but for a team, though, that's veteran-led by aging stars in Augustus, in Whalen, Fowl somewhat getting up there as well, Brunson as well getting up there, Maya Moore in her prime, though, that still, though, folks, I think is a factor as to how far the Lynx will get. Obviously, Cheryl Reeve knows how to push the buttons and run those Clydesdales and horses. But I think we somewhat, though, saw a little bit of fatigue in the postseason last year and towards the end of the regular season last year, I think, in regards to how Minnesota finished up the season. Now, again, are they a lock for the WNBA title? I still think that they are a lock for it. I mean, they're a lock for the finals for sure, and the title at least is also still a potential lock for them. But in spite of it, folks, I still think that the Lynx are going to go as far as how far the aging vets can carry them. Again, Simone Augustus, Whalen, Brunson, Fowles. I mean, those 4 players, somewhat getting up there. At least the top 2 are getting up there. And again, and I have nothing but love and respect for Whalen and for Simone and Lindsay. And they've been absolutely phenomenal players in their time, and I've respected them a great deal, having been able to have shot them some questions on the web via social media. But it's a matter, though, of how much it's a matter, though, of how far can these vets take them to the promised land. Now, again, will they get to the finals? Presumably. Will they? I think that they probably will. But again, it's a matter, though, of how far those aging stars can get them. And I think and I think that's probably my only big X factor or talking point for the Lynx is, how will those aging vets handle the second half grind of the season? Other than that, Minnesota for me definitely a lock for the finals. But it's a matter, though, of how far will they get, though, on those legs right now at this point in time for the Lynx. To the chat box real quick. Todd says many Lynx fans feel this team would be better with Gia Perkins starting over Whalen. Don't see it, but she created dynamic play when she was in. Wayland's minutes will really have to be watched. Not only her, Augustus also. Howard has not gotten the time and played as well as last year. I think she has to pick it up. You know, and that's the thing, though, I think, Todd, too, that Crystal, Shorty, myself have also brought up, though, too, is the Lynx and Cheryl Reeve. And, again, I know we've seen this a lot in Seattle, in Los Angeles again. But it's going to be, though, Todd, a matter of time before the Lynx will have to finally suck it up and play these young players. I mean, obviously, you know, we've seen Laimbeer play great at a high level, DT play great at a high level, Wayland's play great at a high level. But, again, now it's a matter, though, of utilizing the younger talent to continue Minnesota's winning tradition up there the past couple seasons. So, Todd, I agree with you on 100% on that aspect. Christy Wilson says, still think Lindsay Whalen is still one of the best PGs in the league despite being 35. I mean, hey, you know, age is a number. I mean, whether it's, you know, having a, you know, being, whatever it is. I mean, obviously, you know, I'm 23 and have been broadcasting around for the past 7 years and stuff like that, or whether someone you're talking to is 5 years older than you and they're age 28 or what have you. You know, age is a number. And obviously we've seen Elena Beard go back and, you know, find the fountain of youth. We've seen DT do it a couple times. We've also seen Whalen also go back there. So I think, though, that Whalen is still a upper echelon player, despite the age factor. I mean, you know, like I said, folks, I mean, you know, age is nothing but a number, so it's not that big of a deal. But again, folks, your final scores for today's games. Again, the Sky upset the Sparks at home, 82-80 to snap the Sparks' 9-game home winning streak. Stephanie Dolson buries the game-winning triple with 13.7 to go in regulation time. And the Stars beat up the Fever 85-61. A final score from AT&T Center. Recapping your standings, folks, in the playoff picture right now: Minnesota, LA, Connecticut, Washington 1 through 4, Phoenix, New York, Dallas, Atlanta 5 through 8, Seattle, Indiana, Chicago, San Antonio 9 through 12. Minnesota, LA have 2-round byes. Sun and Mystics have 1-round byes. The Mercury would play the Dream in the first single elimination game, while the Liberty and Wings would hook up for their first single elimination game, with it being reseeded following the first round matchup, with the higher remaining seed facing Washington and the lower remaining seed facing Connecticut, and vice versa. Once we get the game, once we get the playoffs going. Todd is asking real quick about Katie doing a show Saturday morning from Seattle. Todd, working out the details still about our programming for you folks over the weekend. Crystal will be actually just taking over our Instagram account over at WNBA 365 over on Instagram. But again, folks, we're aiming again to try to get something done on Saturday. Again, we will have a rare Saturday program, probably either sometime in the morning or sometime in the evening, perhaps. Again, trying to get some things worked out with some of the fans that are going to the event. But again, folks, we'll have more about that. Again, either later tonight or tomorrow or sometime on Saturday. We'll let you folks know. We'll keep you folks in the loop about that. But Crystal, folks, again, will be in Seattle. She's leaving at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning to get up to Seattle for the events. And again, she'll be in charge of our Instagram account, folks. So again, we'll have more about that, as mentioned, once more when we get more details about that later on, either this evening or later on into tomorrow or on Saturday. With that, folks, we thank you folks for hanging out here for the last hour and change. And again, thanks to Christy and Todd for sending in your thoughts in the chat box this evening, as usual. Can always count on you guys for doing that. But again, folks, one final look at the scoreboard tonight. Again, the Sky 82, Sparks 80, and the Stars beat the Fever 85-61. All those final scores in the WNBA for this Thursday night, July the 20th, 2017. With that, folks, as a reminder, once more, again, the 2017 WNBA All-Star Game will take place this upcoming Saturday in a matter of roughly less than 2 days now, roughly, at 12:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 3:30 Eastern. The tip-off, again, of the All-Star Game, and the game can be seen on your local ABC affiliate at 12:30 p.m. PDT, 3:30 p.m. EDT, again, on your local ABC family of networks. Again, folks, as a reminder once more, but again, our good pal, Crystal Thomas, again, will be in Seattle, leaving tomorrow morning, and we'll be taking over our network Instagram account for the whole weekend. We'll have plenty of good stuff for you folks over on the WNBA 365 network Instagram account, which will be shared, of course, on Facebook and Twitter as well. But again, folks, one final time, Sky 82, Sparks 80, Stars 85, Fever 61. With that, folks, until either tomorrow or Saturday, we'll see you folks back here for more All-Star Game coverage. Until then, folks, take care and good night. This has been the WNBA 365 Network. Folks, take care and good night. So long from the Calamac Sports Studios in San Diego. Good night. Bye-bye.